with some points of order around Brexit. And so she sent her apologies. She would have been sitting here, so I won't pretend to be of the right gender for that purpose, but she was due to chair. So I apologise that we've slightly fallen short of our gender balance this morning, but that's through circumstances beyond her control. I also have an apology from Bill Esterson MP. He will be joining us. He expects to arrive at 10:15, so we look forward to that. I will introduce my two panel members here. First, on my left, your right, Stephen Little, who, as well as having a very strong business background as an Open University Business School lecturer, is the BuLO, the Business Liaison Officer for Stretford and Urmston. So he speaks with some experience of going through this process that we're going to talk about today. And then on my right, your left, Simon Lydiard, who's on the executive of SME for Labour, with whom we're jointly conducting this workshop. We're very grateful to them for hosting the venue. And Simon also has a very relevant background as an SME champion in government when he worked in the civil service. You're now free of civil service constraints, so you can tell us what it really like.
I'm very politically partial now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So thank you, Simon, for joining us. And in terms of what we're trying to achieve, we'll keep it very informal. We really want to introduce the concept of the Business Liaison Officer and get some feedback from those of you who've been involved, some help and support for those of you who are interested in appointing a Business Liaison Officer in your constituency. So it's really a hands-on workshop. We're not going to have a lot of lectures. If I could just give you the sort of key points about why we launched this initiative and how it works, and then I'll invite Steve and Simon to follow. I guess it all goes back to our kind of strap line here, making Labour the natural party of business. We were just getting sick and tired of hearing that the Tories are the party of business. It's obviously not true, actually, and the sort of Boris Johnson let the cat out of the bag with his famous comment about F business. I won't use the actual word, but you know what I mean. And so we thought it's about time that we shifted the narrative around Labour. Because if you think of it, we are the biggest membership party in the UK, in fact in Europe still. We have many, many, many members who own businesses, who run businesses, who are in businesses, including at very senior levels. And I bet, and I look to the statisticians in the room to verify this, I bet we have more people in business who are members of the Labour Party than the Tories do in their membership. So we thought it's about time to say and shout from the rooftops, we are the party of business, but we're also the party of workers, and we believe in that partnership between workers, their trade unions, and businesses, and of course the third part of that partnership, government. And I live in Wales, where we actually have a Labour government which believes in that partnership, government, businesses, and trade unions. So that's the partnership model. But you notice it's a bit of a clunky title, I know, BuLO, Business Liaison Officer, but there was a deliberate echo there of the TULO, the Trade Union Liaison Officer. The idea, this is not about preferencing business in our policy over trade unions or workers, it's about the partnership of the two. So we kind of like the BuLO-TULO echo, which makes the point a little bit. So we've got tremendous support from, as you see quoted in the leaflet, John McDonnell, Rebecca Long-Bailey, really, I think, underscoring our view that it's by having a conversation with business at every level, national, we do a lot of that with the FSB, the CBI, other organisations, but also at the local level. So that's why we want CLPs to appoint somebody who's effectively a business champion, another word we could use to describe the role of the BuLO. And many CLPs have already appointed BuLOs, and they're engaging with their local businesses and making the point, we have good policies for business. We are a party of business. So in terms of how you take it forward, I mean, what people like Steve have done, he can tell you more, it's really easy. Your CLP just needs to adopt a resolution. We've got a model resolution. It's got a bit of a job description. there's a sort of list of possible activities in here, but it's not meant to be prescriptive. Basically, the BuLO does whatever your local party unit wants the BuLO to do. And we'll talk about that a bit more. So you pass a resolution. The BuLO is not a functional officer under the rules, so you don't have to have a change of rules. The BuLO will be an existing member of your EC or your GC or whatever structures you have. So this isn't an attempt to get a sort of an infiltration of CLPs to start taking them over. This is just simply saying somebody who's in the structure should take on this role, because it's really important that we have that local engagement. And then, good news, since we last met, we have introduced a deal you cannot refuse, which is that if you were appointed a BuLO, you get a year's free membership of Labour Business. Because, of course, we want the BuLO to be a member of Labour Business, and we provide whatever support we can from the centre. So you can become a member of Labour Business by being appointed a BuLO. But you do need to let us know. And Del here, who's not on the panel, but I'll call on him in a minute to speak. Del Goddard from REC leads on the BuLO. And, you know, it's frustrating, I think, sometimes for us that BuLOs are, he's nodding and smiling, BuLOs are appointed and we don't know where they are, who they are, etc. So we're really keen to collate that information. Because after all, if we don't know who they are, we can't help provide forums to share best practice and all the things that we ought to be doing. So that's how it goes. I've mentioned two other things. So we have a wider relationship with CLPs. We want to affiliate to CLPs, so for the payment of the usual sort of £6, Labour Business can affiliate to your CLP, and that gives you a delegate who must be a member of the CLP and of Labour Business. So affiliation is a great way of getting more deeply engaged in the work of your CLP. Of course, that delegate could also be the BuLO. I mean, that's happened. And we're in the process of setting up regional branches so that we're not just a national affiliate working at the UK level. We want to work regionally so that there's more opportunities for people to get involved in Labour business activities at the regional level. So that's probably enough for me. Is there anything I've said that just doesn't make any sense, or you want to ask me a quick question? Yes, comrade there.
I'm a Labour councillor in Blackburn.
Yes.
But my question really is, you mentioned about other business associates.
Yes.
How much work do you do with newsletters, for example, retailers?
Well, there's a couple of guys here from a very good retail organisation. We work with, obviously at the national level, trade associations rather more than individual businesses, so that it allows us to reach out more widely. So Bill Esterson, when he comes, I'm sure we'll talk about his relationship with your organisation. You can say perhaps a little bit about it in a minute. So we'd like to do that nationally, but at the local level, frankly, you know, it's Liz Hind, who would have been here in this seat, would tell you that she runs a pub, you know. And that's the kind of small business. It might be a newsagent, it might be a pub, it might be just a high street business. But that's a business that we must value as a party, and we must create policies for those businesses. And that's where the BuLO will be helpful. You know, if you identify some of your local businesses in the CLP, and that's one of the tasks of the BuLO, does your CLP know who those businesses are? Are you reaching out to them? And what do they need from government? And I find I've walked up and down, you know, street markets in the most unlikely places, in North Norfolk, for example, real sort of Tory territory. You just start talking to these people. They say, I'm from the Labour Party. I'd like to, you know, hear what your problems are, you know, what your concerns are. How can we help? And it just blows them away. It's quite extraordinary. So I welcome your comment, comrade, and I very much want the BuLOs to be working with micro businesses right down to the one person business, but also we have to work nationally as well. Did you want to just say a little bit about your organisation?
Yeah, well, actually, I just want to come back on what you said earlier, because about the myth. You said the myth about the Tories being the and Labour, obviously there's a lot of it. Why do you think that is?
Why? I think they've had the media on their side to propagate a myth, haven't they? And they prided themselves on being the party of you know, strong economy, strong and stable. Remember that? Theresa May was strong and stable. I really do think it's a myth. Obviously, in certain parts of the economy, the Tories have done quite well for you. If you're a hedge fund owner, you're probably all right. But I really don't think the facts support this idea that they are the party business. I genuinely think that's untrue. But you know, we've still, let's be honest, we've still got a hurdle to mount, a mountain to climb to prove that we are the party business.
So just
goes back a long way, Stuart.
Yeah. So just on what we do, we're obviously we're an organisation.
Can everyone hear what Stuart's
sorry,
saying?
can you hear me? Okay. So we're an organisation. Actually, we're in our 100th year. This is 101 years we've been around. It's called the NFRN. It was originally set up for booksellers and news agents. We've actually now changed the strapline. Now what we are now is the National Federation of Retailers. So we cover coffee shops, pubs. We cover a wide range of businesses, predominantly selling newspapers. That's our number one and our aim in our organisation. So we cover the whole of the UK, including Southern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and we represent at all sorts of levels, both with publishers, wholesalers, business partners, Parliament, to fight the corner for the independent retailer, the small retailers that haven't got huge amounts of resources for HR to do everything in their own business. So I guess the difficulty there with and I like the idea of having a liaison officer and a business liaison officer in that community looking after their interests. The fight is about, obviously, the biggest concern and the biggest worry that a retailer has is the multiples in terms of closing down small independent stores. And you know, we are the heart of the community. We also represent post offices as well, so we are the heart of that community. And the biggest challenge they have is minimum wage, because that's a huge amount of cost. And obviously that goes against some of the points as you've just said, because you are a party for workers. And obviously your policy in terms of workers and the rights and the minimum wage has a detrimental effect on the small businesses out there that's a husband and wife and one part-time member of staff. When it comes to that minimum wage, because you know, as you know, all newspapers now have a cover price, only not, you can't just sell a newspaper whatever you want to sell it at, and costs are going up and profits are going down. So that's the reason why it's a bit of an imbalance, because we need to sort that. I'm not saying that Conservatives do anything different, then maybe the spin is different, and that's where they win on the spin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that.
That's great.
We may have a debate about national minimum wage later. We may not. But this is not primarily a policy forum today. But obviously, having a local liaison officer allows us to listen to the special needs of small businesses.
Absolutely.
And there may be situations where there has to be a special business rate for small businesses. There may have to be special provisions in all sorts of different laws. We were hearing about that in a workshop yesterday on women in business. So this allows us to listen and engage. I mean, we were founded in 1972 by Harold Wilson on the basis that if you don't listen to businesses, you can't expect businesses to listen to the Labour Party. Simple as that. We've got to listen. So I'm not saying I agree with you about the minimum wage. I wouldn't want to see that diluted, but that's a discussion for another day. Thank you for that. So I hope that helps you understand in relation to your question that we're very interested in the needs of very, very small businesses at the local level. So can I call on Steve now and maybe tell us a little bit about your experience as a BuLO, as a living, breathing BuLO?
Yeah, I can pick up on that briefly. It is quite straightforward if you've got a receptive CLP. Both the CLP is affiliated and I am an individual member, and that's a very simple argument to make. I sit in on the EC, but I don't have a vote, but I'm able to have my ears to the ground and contribute so that we factor that in. Now, the particular, and again, it's not one size fits all. The BuLO reflects the constituency. Now, our constituency, Stratford and Urmston, contains Trafford Park, the first and largest industry park in Europe, etc., etc. So clearly the Kellogg's and so forth are going to talk to Kate Green, our MP, are going to talk to Bill Esterson or Rebecca Love-Bailey. So I'm very much focused on the businesses, the smaller businesses within our community, particularly as we've recently regained control of the local authority. And my question is, what are we doing, A, that's making your life easier, and B, what are we doing that's making your life unnecessarily harder, and what capacity have we to do anything about that? And it's very much an ear to the ground, literally door to door, talking to businesses. But my starting point has been, within the membership, because we have a range of members who are actively engaged with their small businesses, which may be one or two people in a practice, for example, small architectural practice, or somebody with an educational consultancy who wants to grow, and also wants to grow, interestingly, as a cooperative. So in my other day job, I'm a retired academic at the Open University Business School. I chaired a not-for-profit organisation which was for partnering high-tech startups with resources both across Europe but also in South and East Asia. So I've had a kind of a high-tech bias, but it's not something that's appropriate in my current location. Sorry, it's losing a thread here.
That's all right.
Because of the vagaries of their different premises, one's paying 4 times the business rate of the other. You know, there's a need for major reconsideration there, but it has to be integrated with all of those other concerns. So as I say, it's a question of establishing that community visibility, and I have to confess that because of the process that we're in at the moment with policy, I've been very much involved in the policy meetings around the Northwest and elsewhere, and the Labour business meetings down in London. So I'm clear where the points of pressure are within the Labour policy making process, that we can bring that business perspective.
Of how much of that business should go to small businesses. They started off with a target of 25%, which they claimed to have met a few years ago. The NAO, by the way, disagrees with them. When I left the civil service in 2016, and could be a little bit more public about my 37 years of Labour Party membership, I kept that quiet when I was a senior civil servant. Actually, the Cabinet Office commissioned me to write a report because they were worried that they weren't going to meet their 33% target, and they weren't, and they're not going to. The report I wrote told them about how some of their processes and approaches to procurement and to contracting were locking small businesses out of government work. A lot of very, very good work is done in local government. Quite a lot of people would have heard of the great work done in Preston, and they've done that work internationally as well. So I think Labour in local government has shown how you can open up business, public sector procurement business, to small businesses, but I think central government needs to do more. The report I wrote for the Cabinet Office, by the way, I asked them how many of my recommendations they had implemented, and they said, well, we really can't tell you because we can't really track it at the moment. We're a little bit busy. I don't really think they've done anything. I starkly told them what they needed, starkly and politely, I must say, told them what they needed to do differently. I really don't think they have done anything differently. Because they haven't, I've written a follow-up report which I've called Buying the Future, and it is actually sponsored by small businesses, so it's completely independent of government. What I'm saying in that is that we need to use public sector spending, in particular to attract SMEs, because the outsourcing model is frankly completely broken. The outsourcing model was always, it became a monster where you were contracting right at the top of the supply chain with big companies who actually didn't do anything. All they did was contract with other people, and there were layers of the supply chain, and the money dripped down rather slowly, if at all. And profits were creamed off at the top. Small and medium enterprises in the middle and at the bottom were being, frankly, ripped off. And they're the people that are delivering the real value. And the other thing is, small businesses, they're active participants in the local economy. So if you spend money with small businesses, money goes into the economy much, much quicker, and it creates new jobs faster. And I won't say too much more because it's free, by the way, on the website. I might mention it later. But what I'm saying is that government and the public sector needs to use procurement much more strategically to create skills in the economy. Because I don't think the big outsourcing companies are creating skills at all. They're trying to buy the skills in from the smaller companies. And those smaller companies, because they're not receiving enough of the profits of public sector procurement, can't invest properly in the development of skills. So I think we need to see local authorities and central government operating much more strategically, trying to contract further down the traditional model of the supply chain, using those contracts to create the skills that will be needed in the future. The government does not have access to the skills in the economy that they need to deliver their major projects. In construction, I can't remember the figures, but there's a huge gap in the amount of skills that the construction industry is going to need to fulfil the kind of major projects the public sector has in over the next decade. Those skills will not be created by the traditional model of contracting and outsourcing. It needs to be much more strategic. And I was in the civil service, I was a civil servant, but I will say that the civil service needs to understand business a lot better, and they need to look beyond the very comfy relationship with the really big suppliers. In particular, by the way, the large management consultancy companies. So I think BuLOs can play a really good role in connecting small businesses, local businesses with local authorities, to try and give those local authorities an appreciation of what capabilities exist in the local economy.
Well, certainly in Trafford within the 18 months, as Andrew Weston, the council leader, says, we are unprecedented, but we have redirected a lot of our resources back into the local economy instead of, say, going on to the profits of the multinational.
Thank you, Simon. I'm going to open it up shortly, but I do want to call Bill to speak in a moment. Just to say on procurement, Simon, those of you interested in public procurement, we also have something on our website about public procurement, looking at issues that you touch on here in terms of SMEs, but the wider agenda for using public procurement, I know something that Bill's a champion of, for delivering a wider labour agenda around diversity, around ensuring that living wage is paid, and the ways that that can be done. The report was put together by lawyers who did point out there are certain things you can't do, but if you get it right, there are certain things you can do to deliver that agenda, which includes local and small businesses being part of the procurement pie, which is so large, as you rightly say. Now, Bill, just a disclaimer, I am not Liz High. She was meant to be chairing. We did have a slightly better gender balance, but she is on the floor of conference dealing with points of order, so that's why she's not here. But that said, it's very good to have you join us. Bill, of course, is the Shadow Business Minister, a Vice President of Labour Business, a huge champion of the Business Liaison Officer, the importance, which I referred to in my opening remarks, of engaging locally through your CLP with that conversation with businesses. So we're very pleased to see you, Bill, and I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Hamish. Thank you all for coming along. And I've just been doing today's business day in the party, where we've got a lot of business organisations in a few rooms that away, I think, that away, make bearings right. And I've just been doing a couple of round tables with business organisations on some of the topics about which actually underpin why we should have business liaison officers. And it's pretty clear to me that we have a very strong business agenda, that the business community recognises that what we're saying about having a single front door, equivalent to the American Small Business Administration, where people know where to go to get business advice, where there is a panel of lenders and investors of the sort you see in America or in Germany, where there is that additional ability to gain either debt or equity finance that is available from the high street lenders, where there is better support for smaller firms who are suffering as a result of late payment. 50,000 businesses go bust every year. That costs the economy £2 billion. It has a real drag on the wider economy as well as on the individual businesses affected. We have a real set of challenges in access to procurement, as you said, Hamish, and I think actually procurement is probably one of the simplest methods of labour in government, really delivering an agenda that works for smaller firms, that works for the wider economy, that delivers a productive and a progressive approach that supports our policies for the green industrial revolution, that maximises the innovation that is in their economy, the ideas in new technology, in renewable energy, in low carbon transport, in low energy housing, and in agriculture with projects like carbon capture and storage. You know, these are all ideas. Well, we're world leaders, but the lack of revenue support in the economy now in these sectors. That I was in Edinburgh last week talking to a company called Nova Innovation. They are one of the world-leading companies in marine turbines. They deliver very effective tidal energy. They've got a project in Shetland they showed me. They have off-grid networks that they can put in place in remote areas like the Shetlands that deliver completely clean energy at a base load that's entirely predictable. We're the best in the world at this stuff, but there is no government revenue support from it from the UK government. And Labour will do all these things in government. The business community is there with us. We have evidence policies that come from business and the trade unions alike. We're in the right place on stopping no-deal Brexit, which is the biggest drag on businesses. I'm fond of saying, the Tories, not least in Boris Johnson's own words, where his attitude is F-business, have demonstrated again and again, in particular with Brexit, but actually also with the policies that have only been there to help the very largest corporations at the expense of other business, have vacated the field of play and left it open to us to be the party of not just smaller businesses, but actually quite a lot of other businesses right across the economy. So we have to grasp this. But I think there is a real misunderstanding and misconception amongst the business community about where Labour is, and we have an enormous job of work to do in rectifying that. That was apparent just from the 2 round tables I did before 10 o'clock today. It was apparent in the business summit that I spoke at yesterday, and it is apparent in a lot of the engagement I have. There's a real lack of confidence in us, and much of it is to do with not understanding our policies. Some of this is presentations, some of this is the way we developed some of the policies, but a lot of it is communication. So each and every one of us in the party, I think, needs to do far more in that engagement. Having the business liaison officer is a very, very important and strong idea. I think Labour business can do so much. I think the front bench can do so much. But I think we need to take our membership with us on this agenda. The private sector is a fantastically important part of the economy. The small business part of the private sector is responsible for half of the employment in the private sector alone. And it is where the growth is coming from, it is where the future for working people is coming from, and it is where Labour needs to be. So this is really, really important work, Hamish, and I encourage you all to engage with it as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. I will open it up now. I just wanted to put a question to you that was put to me earlier before you arrived, Bill. And that was from Stuart here. You know Stuart, I think. Why is it that the Conservative Party for so long has got away with the myth that they are the party of business? We talked about the efforts we're making to shift that narrative, to recognise Labour as the natural party of business, but we've got a long way to go. How did the Tories do that for so long? What's your kind of take on how we bust that myth and reposition ourselves?
Yeah, well, because of course, actually, if you look at the history of the Labour Party, there is a very important strand and tradition which comes from particularly smaller firms in communities where there was a commonality of interest and values with workers and with trade unions and with other parts of the Labour movement. That goes way back, and so this is not new. And yet, I think because of the language of industrial relations and the adversarial way in which perhaps that was always positioned, it became very easy to characterise us as being anti-business, and that you were either pro-worker or you were pro-business, when actually there was far more in common than that which divides us, to quote what Joe Cox famously said. So I think we have to bust myths, you're right, Hamish, and that is very much one of them. And when you look at the value set of businesses and business owners and people who work in businesses, large and small, because increasingly people go to work and want to replicate their desire to change the world they have in their private lives, what they do at work, and that's true in large firms too. And you are starting to see more responsible activity from some larger firms too. I'd like to see more, but you make a start. So we are pushing an open door quite often, and PwC of all organisations tell me, and I used to work for one of their predecessor organisations, and it definitely wasn't true then, but they reckon more than half their workforce voted Labour in 2017. Now that is a remarkable turnaround to see somebody in an organisation that is at the heart of capitalism and big business, where most of its workforce are supporters of a radical Labour government. So we are in a better place, but we've got a lot of work to do. And the Tories they continue to trash their reputation with business. That doesn't automatically translate to us taking it on, and we must do the work to replace them.
Thanks, Bill. So let's open it up. Comrade here, and then behind, and we'll move around the room.
Hi, I'm Darren Price. I'm a BuLO, although I'm one of the ones that you didn't know about.
Yes.
You didn't know. I'm also Vice Chair of CLP, so it's not an issue. We can just easily do an existing role. And I'm a local councillor, and I run a business. So I've got a few different hats on here. In my sleepy district council on the edge of the Peak District, the Tories jeer at us whenever we talk about business. But on our benches, in our small group of 13 Labour councillors, we run 4 businesses, which is remarkable, including mine, which is one of the larger ones. Now, that is a ridiculous state of affairs, but they still jeer. And they still recruit their councillors because their membership is so shockingly poor by knocking on the doors of local shops and asking if they'd like to become a councillor before they're members of the Conservative Party. This is how it happens. Up and down the country. If you live and work in London, it's very different. You go out to rural, sort of, the rest of Britain, and it's a very different place indeed. There's a couple of points I'd like to make, and one key question at the end. Procurement is key. I used to work for the Regional Development Agency at Branch West Midlands, and I tried my best to change our procurement policies with regards to professional services. The PQQs, pre-qualification questionnaires of getting people, were the hurdle. It meant that the same 5 companies, usually with 3 initials, were getting every contract, regardless of how well they performed, which was usually pretty poorly. And we managed to get that changed on a couple of things in Stoke at the time, appointing some very good architects to do master plans. That was a real breakthrough. But then it was abolished in 2011, and we all made ourselves redundant, and my little team. It was a sad day. The point about small business and funding is key. We set our business up in 2014. We had no access to finance, no access to funding. We went down a very innovative route, and we funded £180,000 via Crowdcube. So we have 212 investors, most of which have got very small amounts. Some have got more amount, up to a few £1,000s. Making money available for small business is absolutely key, and local investment banks that you talked about in the States and Germany, from my experience of running and trying to grow a small business, and we have grown, we've doubled in size since last year, which I'm pleased with. So I saw you, Hamish. It's really good. But Crowdcube made that happen. It gave us the money to be able to invest, to increase stock, to take on premises, to take on staff. It's not an easy route at the moment. It's very difficult to get finance off banks still. They may have been bailed out, but they're not paying it back into businesses. But to me, there's an elephant in the room in this room, there's an elephant in every room in this conference, and that's Europe. Now, my business exports. We export across Europe, only within Europe. We're one of 150,000 UK businesses that exports only within the EU. There's a really good reason for that, bloody good reason, and that's that exporting outside of the EU is a damn sight more complicated, and there's only half a dozen of us. And going through that whole process of customs agents and bonded warehouses and all that kind of stuff is something that we don't want to get involved with. So, for that reason, I got involved very early on with the Business for People's Vote campaign. And I was one of the few small business people on that panel. And the launch in London in November last year, sitting alongside Sir Mike Rake, former Chief Executive of BT, and Justin King, of former Sainsbury's boss. And there were a couple of small businesses too, of which we were one. It was unanimous. There wasn't a single person I've spoken to in business who trades. Apart from the small shops, quite a lot of small shops voted Brexit because they don't operate outside of their own small area. They don't import and export. So the elephant in the room is, what is Labour for Business doing to make our currently not firm enough policy of opposing Brexit at every level more firm, because from what I'm hearing about this conference, all of my previous fears before I drove down yesterday are still apparent. There's still attempts at ridiculous compositing and fence sitting and grasping onto the top of that fence for every last.
Yeah. Look, let's talk about Brexit then, because clearly, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, that's really good analysis, Darren. And Labour business has been absolutely rock solid in calling for a final say vote where we campaign for Remain. So I think you're in the right room. And that's where I'll be. I am worried that the vote will go the other way today.
So
Because the unions seem to be lining up to be neutral, and I don't see how you can go on a doorstep and make that case, and people go, well, because actually I think Jo Swinson has gifted us this because she's gone too far. The Liberal Democrats can't take yes for an answer.
Well, absolutely.
They've been calling for a referendum, a final say with a campaign for Remain for months, if not years. The moment Labour gets there, oh no, that's not good enough for us. They're never going to be. It's never going to be enough. It would be a disaster to just go to a vote. The country would be up in arms, and we wouldn't resolve it. So you have to get it back to the people, and you've got to take sides in it. And I know Harold Wilson's, played the role of it was different times, exactly. That's a pretty good way of putting it.
Understand.
Can I copyright? That's a good way of explaining. And it ain't going to work. And I have every sympathy with my colleagues in Leave seats. And in that sense, it's easy for me. I'm a Remainer and a Remain seat, and so me campaigning for it is obvious. But
I'm a potential PPC and a Leave.
Sure. Look, I get it. But look, if Mary Craig can do it, if Anna Turley can do it in Leave seats as Remainers,
Paul Williams.
Yeah, indeed.
Then
so can other people, because you've actually got to say to your Leave voters and your Remain voters, it's crucial we have a close economic relationship with the European Union for all the reasons you said. But once we leave, God forbid it happens, and I think it probably is going to happen, unfortunately. I mean, this may all be redundant because I think we may have left one way or the other. But anyway, we'll get there in a few weeks' time. Whether we leave with no deal or leave with a deal, that's only the start of Brexit. And this is the bit that perhaps hasn't had enough airtime. Because the negotiations then start again from scratch, with the money unresolved, with the borders unresolved, with the arrangements unresolved. There's 5,000 sets of arrangements. Supply chain at risk. Unless we have that close economic relationship, we are in real trouble. And your point about international trade is of course well made. I mean, I've kind of touched on it, the lack of revenue support, but that's just the start of it. You need so much more than that. And so I just hope that people will think through just how hard this is going to be to take this onto to doorsteps, to take this into. We've seen the trouble that Emily and some other colleagues have got into doing media interviews, where the journalists are just laughing in their faces about the absurdity of the position. I mean, I don't intend when I'm asked this question to get myself in that position, because I say, well, of course I'm going to campaign for Remain, and of course I think in the end that's what we must do. But it will be a problem. By the way, I think there's a ceiling to the Lib Dem vote because of their position, and I'm already hearing that on doorsteps, that people can see that the referendum is the right way of doing it. And it does appeal to Leave and Remain voters. We're almost there, Darren. Actually, that's the frustration. But we do need to just have that. We do need to come off the fence on it, just that bit further.
But the process of simulation, I think, from one side to the move.
Yeah. Darren, I'm going to come back to your other questions. I'd like to ask Simon to address that.
Sorry,
that's okay.
I will
you got carried away.
And the point about procurement as well.
And the elephant, and I want to say something very briefly about the elephant in the room in terms of Labour business. And then access to funding. I'd like to come back to you on that, Bill, a bit later, because
Well,
you and I
it's
have
got to be
had
quick because
yeah,
I've got to go
we'll
back.
do it quickly.
I've got to
You
go
and I have
now.
had some discussions of the ways in which the SBA in the US has done
Yeah.
some innovative things on that. So I'll come back to you on that in a minute.
You haven't got a minute because I've got to go.
Okay.
So it left me now.
All right, do the access to funding point, and then we'll.
What would you
there's a
like?
colleague here.
What would you like me to answer about?
Well, I think what struck me when we hosted that meeting with the then head of the Small Business Administration, it's actually not the case that the SBA in the US gives money or grants money or even lends money to small businesses. What it does is it underwrites it. And the position was very clear that they very rarely have defaults. So you're not talking about, throwing money at small businesses. You're talking about allowing them to do normal commercial loans, which are so much cheaper because underwritten. So I just thought you might want to expand on that.
Well, it's going to be quick because I've got to go back to the business day and round tables I'm hosting. But it is about underwriting. It is about the risk profile who don't qualify for the high street lenders and equivalents in debt and equity. You can do it with a panel of lenders and investors because the Americans do it. The German system, which is slightly different, is still targeting that next group of businesses who find it hard to reach mainstream funding. And it's for all sorts of reasons. It's lack of track record sometimes, but a good business plan can be good enough. And with government underwriting, I think that really is a crucial part of the answer here. So, I'm very keen on that. It is something John McDonnell has touched on too. So,
is that going to become party policy?
Well,
Are you optimistic?
Whether it is before an election, it's definitely part of the discussion to be had with businesses about how we set this kind of agency up, and I'm optimistic on that score.
It's good to know. Okay, we'll let you go. Thanks very much, Bill.
Thanks.